Initially, the vice chancellor agreed, and a proposal to offer 1,000 rupees was accepted, but later denied as the university finance officer was not in favor of this proposal. So the VC was then agreed to offer 500 rupees instead of 1,000. So it can be seen that there was a huge difference of opinion in this case, and through compromising, this difference was resolved. This example can also be analyzed for the case of domination, like if the finance officer was a powerful entity and he would have been refused that this proposal is not mine, you go with your own problems and solve yourself. I'm not going to do anything. So, this will be the case when the difference is settled through domination. Moreover, by settling differences through these two approaches, there will always be a kind of residual feeling. Hence, both these ways are not satisfactory. In domination, only one may get what it wants, and in compromising, neither will get what they want. The third way to settle any difference is through the method of integration. It means finding a way in which neither side had to sacrifice anything. So, to explain this better, let's take an example. Mary Parker Follett comes with the idea of integration when she was once studying in a library along with a friend. She wants to open a window, and at the same time, her friends were refusing. They both resolve this difference through a third way and find out a new solution by opening a side window. So they deliberate on this difference. Another example was cited by Sir when he was managing this coaching and guidance center. He used to have a problem whenever people were invited for a special lecture. There were little space in the room for sitting arrangement. So he discussed the same with the university engineer and comes with no solution. Then he further discussed this issue with an architecture and he proposed a new solution on this issue, and then it was solved by an alternative. Thus, sometimes for resolving difference, we have to look beyond, which Mary Parker Follett calls it a third way. So she suggests that for effective coordination, this mindset would resolve difference in this way. So in the same way, uh, in any organization, it helps in bringing unity of efforts and achieving the goal. So in organization, the various teams should have to control among themselves. So integrating means that they are uniting different things and coming up with a different solution and appreciate each other concerns. And this is also known as a cross-functional system. And the last thing is the system of collective responsibility, which could be the core of resolving the differences. Example, we all are collective part of AMU and we all have a mission. So if we all feel that all of us are a part of the mission, then the coordination becomes easy. So that's all about the recap. Thank you.
Okay. Has the other person joined? No?
No, sir.
Okay. Saria, you have covered all the points, and there were some issues which were discussed by Zareen ma'am in the beginning, especially vertical and horizontal coordination. So that point may be added to the content. And second thing, I think I also discussed one more aspect of coordination, and that is some system of cross functioning in the organization. Right? So, in addition to the idea of integration as one method of resolving differences and the system of collective responsibility, every organization needs some system of cross functioning so that people from one functional area understand the perspective of other functional area.
Exactly.
So this was also a very important point which Mary Parker Follett had cited in her writings on coordination. So that also was a very important point. And we have earlier also discussed this point that whenever there is a specialized nature of work, people are likely to have different perspectives. For example, the perspective of finance officer, I also need to appreciate that ultimately he is responsible for managing the finances of the overall finances of the university. So if I propose something which has university-wide implications, I also need to appreciate his concerns. Right? That is possible only when people have this idea of what are the demands of other functional areas. So this was the point which could be added. And overall, you have a clear style of delivery, and you speak slowly and you know clearly. But I think a presentation, a good presentation, has to be a bit charged. It needs to have more force in the delivery. So that force was needs to be added to your style. Isn't it? So that will make even more impactful presentations. So right now you are doing a good job, but you need to do an excellent job. Right? And for that, you need to have a high energy level while making a presentation. So that would further impact your performance positively. Okay, sorry. So now let us start our discussion on leadership. Hmm. This is the fourth topic, the fourth unit which we intend to cover now. And soon the Zareem ma'am will be announcing the schedule of the sessional also, which we are going to have because we have already covered 3 units now. And I understand you have all got the notes of the 3 units. So based on that, we will have the test shortly next week. We'll announce the exact date. Now let us start our discussion on leadership. What is leadership? And before I start the discussion, just to provide you a context, I'll share with you 2 parables. These are Chinese parables, and I'll share them with you. The idea is that maybe with the help of these variables, you are able to get some idea of what is leadership all about. So rather than explaining leadership is this, I'll go with this approach. I'll first cite 2 parables. In fact, there were 5 parables. I've just picked 2 of them, and these 5 parables were published as parables on leadership in Harvard Business Review once. So I'm citing 2 of them out of those 5. The first leader, the first parable was titled as "Sound of the Forest," and the parable was like this: that there was a king, and he had a son, the young prince, and he wanted that his son at some stage should become a ruler like him. So he takes him to a forest where an enlightened master was there. Like in India, we had the system of Gurukul. So likewise, in China also they had the system of Gurukul. There was an enlightened master, and the young ones was entrusted in the custody of this enlightened master. So the king takes his son to this enlightened master and requests him that teach him the art of becoming a good ruler. So this was the brief. And This enlightened master, he assigns a task to this young prince. The task was that this young prince was supposed to go to the forest, be there, and listen to various sounds of the forest. This was his assignment. He was expected to absorb all the sounds and come back and describe all those sounds. So this young prince spends a substantial amount of time in the forest and comes back. And naturally, when the master asks him the obvious question that, what did you listen? He describes various sounds. And he says, Master, I listened to the chirping of the birds. I listened to the roar of the lion. I listened to the sound of wind blowing and hovering. All those sounds he describes. But Master says that this is not enough. There are some more sounds in the forest. Now, this young boy is very perplexed and he says, Master, have I already not listened to all the sounds? He said, no, there are some more sounds in the forest. And you must go and listen to those sounds. So naturally, it is master's command, so he has to go. He goes again and desperately tries to listen what else he could listen. Then, one fine morning, he was sitting under deep contemplation in the forest, early morning. And then he started listening to some very faint sounds, sounds which he has not heard before. And then he realizes that perhaps these were the sounds that my master wanted me to listen. And then he comes back with a feeling of elation and excitement, and he says, Master, when I listened closely, I could hear the unheard. He said, like, he said, I could listen to the sound of flower bird opening in the morning. I could even listen to the sound of morning dew evaporating in the environment. I could even listen to the sound of sun warming the earth. And then his master became very happy. And he says that to listen, to hear the unheard is the necessary quality of a good ruler. The rest of the things you can learn, like archery or horse riding and all. But this is the core skill of a good ruler. And once you master this art, you can expect to become a good ruler. And he says that demise of the states come when rulers listen to superficial sounds only and not to these deeper sounds, because then only he can hope to understand feelings and pains that shall never be shared, true feelings and opinions that shall never be communicated. So this was one of the parable which this was shared in the Harvard Business Review as Chinese parables on leadership. Now the second parable was titled as River and Fire. Okay. Now, what happened in this parable? The situation was described like this: that there was a king, and he had taken over the affairs of an estate, and but he had this nagging doubt that ever since he has assumed the responsibility of this state, things are not going up. Actually, they are going down, and there is some downslide. But he was not able to understand why this downslide. And he wanted to seek the wisdom of an enlightened master on this account. So he goes to the forest where such an enlightened person was there. And he discussed his dilemma with him that I am trying very hard, I am making all efforts, but somehow I have this feeling that things are not that rosy. So, what could be the reason? Where my approach is wrong? What is happening? And this enlightened master mm, speaks nothing and simply gestures. When it is almost dusk time when the sun is about to set, and they gesture and they walk together. They walk deep into the forest, and then they reach to a point in the forest where there is a river which is flowing in the mid of the forest. And now it is almost dark, very dark. The night has set in. So this master gestures to the king that collect some firewood, and he collects the firewood, and they lit the fire, and the fire burns, and fire burns brilliantly all through the night, and its flames are dancing, leaping upward. So all through the night they sit beside that fire, and the master says nothing, just they sit and reflect. So when it is morning time and sun is about to come out, the fire starts receding, and ultimately it's put out. And for the first time, the master asks the king, "Do you understand the point that I'm trying to make?" And the king feigns ignorance and he said, "Sorry, master, I'm not able to comprehend the wisdom that you want to impart. What is the wisdom? Please share." And then master explains and he says that think of this fire when it was burning last night. It was all powerful. Nobody could have come near it. In fact, no by a mighty beast could have come near it. But ultimately, what happens to that fire? What we get is a handful of ashes. That's all. Because the fire is so strong that it is consumed by its own force. As opposed to that, think of this river. When we came here last night, we washed our hands and feet. We felt refreshed. Think of its origin. It starts as some small stream in some distant forest, and then it sails downward, and in the process becomes broader and deeper. It willingly enters into every crack of the earth, and then ultimately gets consumed in the ocean. So, but in the process, it is the source of life and sustenance. All vegetation depends on it. So you have to ask this question to yourself. Are you a ruler like fire, or are you a ruler like river? And the answer to this question will decide or will help you understand why you are not able to do as well as you wanted to. So, in the context of these two parables which I have shared with you, I would like to have a few responses. what is your understanding of leadership? What is leadership?
So, from the first parable, Sound of the Forest, you said that to hear the unheard is the core skill of a ruler. So if we
Mm,
see it in terms of an organization's perspective, I believe that if you are a leader or if you're leading a team, you should be accepting enough to take opinions from others, to integrate all the opinions in an organization, to basically hear them out. I think that's
mm,
what I got from the first parable.
mm. Okay. And any other response from others?
Sir, I would like to say something.
Palak, I will appreciate if you can open your video also.
Okay, sir. Sir, according to me, a leader is a person which not only listens to its subordinate, but is also able to understand what they are actually trying to say, and also read between the lines and between the communicating words, which they are not able to communicate. He is also flexible enough to make to. He is also flexible enough to take the opinions from the others, as what Anam said, but he is also so much competent in terms that he is able to convince the others to come to his terms, not by just by the matter of the force, but by the ability to convince them.
Very good. So the term that Anam used, hear them out, and use persuasion,
It's a
your
power
own
of persuasion.
persuasion to convince others as to why we should move in a particular direction. Yes. So fine. What is this idea of being conveyed in this parable of river and fire? Can we listen to some others also, apart from Anam and Palak? Do they have opinion?
A leader must be strong enough to influence the decision of his subordinates or his colleague.
Strong enough, what do you mean by that? Because as if we refer to the parable, fire is also very strong, isn't it?
Sorry, he should be able to take the bold decision, and his decisions must have implications on the other people.
So that is what I want to understand. What do you mean by that boldness? One boldness is that you act like a bulldozer. Hmm? You bulldoze your way out.
Sir, the most prominent example which we can make out from these two case studies or two example, we can also apply it to the current example of the Ukrainian president, who was bold enough to stay there to protect his people. And I think the examples are also trying to convey the same message, that it's not about taking only ordering the people you work for that work for you, but also when there are odd situation, when the time is not unfavorable, you need to lead from the front, and
Yes.
that's what the exact boldness will be.
Okay. sticking your neck out
Yes, sir.
and leading by example. Hmm?
Yes.
So, I hope by now you must have appreciated that when we were talking about the parables, we had a leader in mind who is, you know, who hears others out, isn't it? If I can use Anam's expression, or Palak said that he's flexible, he's accommodative, he joins different perspectives. That is the model of leadership which perhaps these parables are trying to depict. But now let me share with you another model. And I think at this juncture, I will take the help of a PPT. And this model, the other model, alternate model, I've picked out again from another book. It is called 48 Laws of Power. And Robert Greene, who has written this book, his claim is that he too has distilled out the wisdom of last 5,000 years. And he quotes authorities like Machiavelli, like Arthashastra. And he says that how to get power and how to hold power. For that, he proposes certain laws. So let me share with you some of these laws. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I have already discussed with you the two Chinese parables. So I'll come to this Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And naturally, I will not be able to cite all the laws. I'm just sharing with you some of the laws so that you can appreciate what is the content of the other laws also. This, what sample I'm sharing with you will give you a sample of the thought process. For example, one of the laws says, get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. In management, we have been told about this definition that management is the art of getting things done to others. So this is one of the law picks a thread from that leader is one who uses others to further his own cause. So who built Taj Mahal? Shah Jahan? Not those 20,000 workers who work day and night, and ultimately who remembers them? So what is remembered is you build the Taj Mahal. To get others to do the work for you, but credit accrues to you. This is what is one of the laws. Then another law in the same way, plan all the way to the end. And I think the best analogy that we can give to explain this law is leadership is like a game of chess. You have to move very judiciously, very cautiously, very deftly, but you have a end in mind. And all your moves are guided by that end that you have, that ultimately you have to reach your destination. In the process, you will have some friends, some of your companions. You will move, they are like mohras of the chessboard, and you will move them very deftly. In the process, you will encounter some opposition. So you have to decide which mohra to use against which mohra of the opponent. And ultimately, through this mind game, you reach to your destination. That is one of the law. The third law says learn to keep people dependent on you. What is that? You all must have heard that tale, पंचतंत्र tale, कि जो बिल्ली है वो शेर को एक गुर नहीं सिखाती है ना। हम लोगों के उसमें कहा जाता है कि बिल्ली जो है वो शेर की मौसी। तो मौसी टीचेस एवरीथिंग बट नॉट वन थिंग, because then if you teach everything, people will become too empowered and they will not be then dependent on you. Hold something with yourself so that people continue to look up to you. Don't share all your armory. Hold something in your arsenal, because then only people will be dependent on you. Let me share with you some other laws which are very, very shocking again. Pose as friend, work as a spy. How to hold power? You have to pose like a friend, but actually you are gathering information, because information is power. We all have heard this phrase, information is power. So you should know what is happening in the for example, if you are managing a university, who is doing what. So people may use spies, but better be your own spy. And a good leader is one who knows the art of artful spying. Every situation provides you an opportunity. Every situation provides you that opportunity to gather information. And that information, who is against whom, who can be your friend, who is your foe, who is planning things deviously, all that you should have at your fingertips. So you should pose as a friend but work as a spy. This also is another law. Keep others in suspended terror. आपका डर बना रहे. Because love and all these are emotions which people discard on the first opportunity, but terror survives. अगर आपका डर बना हुआ है, you can get their subjugation. और उसमें कहीं ना कहीं आपको थोड़ा सा अनप्रेडिक्टेबल भी होना पड़ेगा. लोगों को लगे कि भाई कुछ कर देते हैं. So डर बना है. There is a story, just on a lighter note I am sharing this, that there was a snake and he came in contact, and the snake was very venomous and he used to bite people and all that. But sometimes this kira of sharafat got into his head, and he went to a guru. Under his influence he decided to become mild. So but when he became mild, children started playing with him. When they got to know that he is no longer, the snake is no longer biting and all, so they would at times hit him. People will throw stones at him and all that. So one day, in a very bruised state, he went to his guru and he said, क्या कर दिया आपने, मेरा तो जीना हराम हो गया, बच्चे तक मुझको मार रहे हैं. तो उसके गुरु ने उससे कहा कि भाई मैंने तुमसे काटने के लिए मना किया था, फुंकारते तो रहते, इससे तुम्हारा डर बना रहता, isn't it? So likewise, this parable says that keep others in suspended terms. आपका डर बना रहे. Another law in this regard says crush your enemy totally. आपने ये भी मुहावरा सुना होगा हमारी हिंदुस्तानी जबान का कि सांप को कभी अधमरा नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए. Because if you leave him in a bruised state, the snake will gather strength and will bite back with venom. So if you are out to crush the enemy, do a complete job of it. सर उड़ा दीजिए. Isn't it? जैसे हेमू ने उड़ाया था, आपको याद होगा अकबर पीरियड. So your job is to ensure total annihilation of the enemy. क्योंकि उसी से एक तो enemy will never recover and उससे आपका टेरर भी बढ़ जाएगा. लोगों तो भाई बहुत नुकसान कर देते हैं. Again, let me share with you these two more laws, and then we will stop here for reflection on this other model of leadership which this book is trying to propose to us. Infection. Avoid the unhappy and the unlucky. What is this law saying? Associate yourself with the lucky ones. पैसा है जिनके पास, वेल्थ है, खुशहाल हैं. बहुत ज्यादा जो है वो झंडा लेके दूसरे के लिए नहीं खड़ा होना. नेवर सेव ए ड्राउनिंग मैन. क्योंकि आप में तरस आ गया, अरे आदमी डूब रहा है, यहाँ जवान नदी पे हमारे कई स्टूडेंट, अक्सर ऐसा हुआ है, हादसा हो गया तो उसका साथी भी पता चला उसे बचाने के लिए डूबा तो वो भी साथ में डूब. तो if a man is drowning, it is his own phal of his karmas. You are not responsible. Because if you try to save a drowning man, it will precipitate your own fall. Isn't it? So avoid such people and associate yourself with the happy ones, the fortunate ones, the wealthy ones. That will establish your leadership. कि भाई बड़े लोगों में घूमते हैं. लेकिन वो सब कीजिए, लेकिन do not commit to anyone. There is a story which is quoted by Robert Greene, again from history, this example of this virgin queen who had many suitors, but she never accepted. I mean, she continued to give hope to many, but ultimately what she was doing, she was playing her own game to retain the power which she had. And naturally she needed the support of the male companions also. And one of the way to arouse their hope was that she will marry them, but she never married. And she always gave them hope, but never the full satisfaction that ultimately she would marry. So these are some of the laws which I have shared with you, and I'm stopping this presentation for a while. So now this is the other law, the other view which I have shared with you. What is leadership as per this view? What is the idea that you get? Who is a leader? A master manipulator?
So it's a little unethical at some point. So, for example, not saving a drowning person, but it is the role of a leader to make other, like you told us in some previous classes, that leaders make leaders, right? So, how is it ethical to not save the drowning person?
Because the drowning person may precipitate your own fall. As simple as that.
So, but we'll take precautions accordingly now. We'll not just drown with that person. We're going
Actually,
to take precautions.
as per this view, the leader is strategically cunning. The term used is cunning, clever. So he will make an assessment. इसको बचाने से फायदा है कि नहीं? Ultimately, what he will be guided by, he will be guided by his own self-interest. अगर if it helps, इससे मुझे वाहवाही मिल जाएगी और लोग ताली बजा रहे होंगे कि भाई he saved, तो बचाइए. So ultimately, what is guiding him? Even this act, noble act, will be guided by his own self-interest. That is the model of leadership which it proposes. Leader has a purpose. It is his purpose.
Sir, may I add one more perspective to that saving a drowning man?
Yes.
Sir, I read somewhere that if a man is drowning and you are seeing that a man is drowning, then don't ever directly go to save him in the river.
Hmm.
Use the rope and hand it over that rope to someone else, and then try to pull that rope from behind. Because if you try to save a drowning person, then he will pull you in the river, even if you know the swimming.
Yeah.
So I guess that can also be applied here.
Hmm. So ultimately, I mean, there are so many people languishing in jails in India. We all know it. All kind of activists. But is there a class of people who is actually helping them? So maybe as per Palak, कि भाई कुछ लोगों को प्रमोट, मतलब कोर आइडिया ये है कि आप हर मामले में झंडा लेके मत खड़े हो जाए कि यू आर द सेवियर. दिस इज व्हाट इट इज बीइंग सजेस्टेड. जज्बात में बह गए, हम भी खड़े हैं. Again, that analogy, it's a game of chess. आपको पता होना चाहिए कि किस मोहरे से आपको कौन सा मोहरा गिराना है. This is the view of leadership. And the world of leadership has seen examples of both the kinds of leaders. We have had a Hitler in this world. We have had a Mother Teresa also in this world. So, this hard word of leadership, if you were to choose the model, which one would be that to get things done?
Sir, qualities of both should be in a person. Both qualities should be there.
डंडा भी हाथ में हो और कुछ दूसरे हाथ में मक्खन भी हो, isn't it?
दवाई दर
जिसकी
दवाई दर
जिसकी जहाँ जरूरत पड़े वो लगा दीजिए, isn't it? Is that what you are suggesting, Zishan?
Yes, sir.
देखिए एक माइंड सेट होता है ना. We are talking of a dominant mindset of the leader, isn't it? And I've given you examples so that both the contrasts, both the models are clear to you. मदर टेरेसा की मिसाल शायद बहुत अच्छी नहीं थी क्योंकि यू कैन से कि इट इज अ सोशल वर्ड. अगर if you ask me to cite an example from political arena only, I can cite the example of Nelson Mandela. Isn't it? The person ruled a nation and ruled. आज जो है यूएसएसआर में आप देख रहे हैं क्या हो रहा है. ये यूएसएसआर हुआ करता था, है ना, यूनाइटेड नेशन था. यूक्रेन वाज पार्ट ऑफ इट. At some stage they broke away from the federation. और साउथ अफ्रीका आज भी एक नेशन है. And only one person can be credited for achieving that feat, and that was Nelson Mandela. A country which was so deeply divided on the basis of race, color of the skin, is one country. USSR could not survive. And Nelson Mandela was a man who actually, if you read his biography, you will be amazed that such a person existed in this world. A person who was in jail for 26 years of his life. I mean, the best prime years of his life were wasted away in the jail. And this fellow comes out of the jail and has his sanity intact. And then he is destined to rule the nation. He rules the nation, but causes no harm to those who has wasted his 26 years of his life. So we have had model. We have had a Hitler in this world. That's what I think. That would be an apt example. We have had a Hitler in this world, and we have had a Nelson Mandela also. So what is your dominant mindset? ये तो बड़ा pragmatic सा जवाब है कि साहब दोनों होनी चाहिए.
Sir, at this point, neither of the two. So, because, like, if we see Nelson Mandela's example, okay, he did a lot of great work, and it is all because of his efforts that what South Africa is today. But he also gave a lot to that freedom and to that independence that South Africa has today. And on the other hand, Hitler, again, it comes about like it comes to ethics and morality. So I'm not clear on this really.
Actually, for that we need to understand first what leaders are called upon to do. What is the job of a leader? And here I am relying on the ideas of an academic leader. Her name is Nan Cohen. She was the vice chancellor of two US universities, and she has done a lot of reflection. She was basically a political scientist and theorist, and she rose to become the vice chancellor. And for quite some time, I think for almost a decade, she was the vice chancellor of two of US prestigious educational institutions, Duke College and Wellesley College. Duke was a cosmopolitan university. Wellesley College was only for women. So she headed both the institutions. And then she reflected on this issue of leadership. And she raised this question first, that first let us understand. Anam, if you are confused, it is good that you are confused because we all have our confusions. And out of those confusions, when we mull over them, some light comes out. So let us first understand what leaders are called upon to do. And there are three things that all leaders are called upon to do. All walks of life, be it academics, running a university, or running a nation, running in a sports academy, running a hospital. Leaders, major part of the job is leaders are called upon to solve problems. All leaders face problems. In fact, leader becomes a kind of garbage can where all problems are dumped. आप यूनिवर्सिटी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देख लीजिए, स्टूडेंट एजिटेशन हो रहा है, अब साहब वाइस चांसलर साहब मसला हल करें. हर तरह की छोटी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम अल्टीमेटली रीचेस टू द वाइस चांसलर्स डेस्क. And a major and significant part of the time of a leader is spent on solving those problems. The first model of the leadership says that be a part of the crowd. The second model says be apart from the crowd. I hope you can appreciate the difference. Be a part of the crowd. Leader mingles like river, mingles with the crowd. The expression that was used in that parable willingly permeates every crack of the earth. So leader is part of the crowd as per this view. But second view says that no, leader is distant. He is distant, he is cold, not guided by emotions. जैसे पलक्ष ने कहा कि भाई अगर बचाना भी है तो वो दिमाग से काम करो, उसमें रस्सी लाओ, ये नहीं कि अचानक कूद पड़े नदी. रस्सी का अरेंजमेंट करो, किसी और को दो, उसको थमाओ कि आप खुद न गिर जाएं. तो इट्स अ माइंड गेम. लीडरशिप इज अ माइंड गेम एज पर दिस व्यू.
Sir, I have a question.
Just a minute. So these are the two models before us, and we have to solve problems. Now let me ask you this question first. Through which approach you can solve problems better? By being part of the crowd or by being apart from the crowd? We can solve problems by working with the group or by being away from the group, maintaining a distance.
So what if we do by solving the problem of the people? जैसे बस
That's
हम
what my question.
लोगों की बस प्रॉब्लम नहीं सॉल्व करते हैं, उसको सही से यानी ऐसा कुछ कर दें कि इन फ्यूचर भी उससे रिलेटेड प्रॉब्लम ना हो.
वो तो है ही, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम्स तो किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में आती रहेंगी। देखिए 90% ऑफ द टाइम लीडर इज डूइंग दिस जॉब, सॉल्विंग प्रॉब्लम्स। भाई देखिए जो भी यूनिवर्सिटी का रूटीन है उसमें प्रॉब्लम खड़ी होती है, एडमिशन नहीं हुआ किसी का, isn't it? अब इस कैटेगरी में मेरा नॉमिनेशन होना चाहिए था, मेरा नहीं हुआ, suppose this is the issue, ultimately the problem will go to him. Each year there will be some cases, जैसे वाइस चांसलर को एक कॉल ये लेनी होती है कि साहब लीव सैंक्शन करें टीचर्स की, स्पेशली दोज हु गो फॉर लॉन्ग लीव। अब उसमें झगड़े भी खड़े होते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल व्हेन आई वाज यंग, two of my colleagues also applied for leave. We all made a case. I was going for pursuing my PhD and I had a very good offer, but ultimately I was not given the leave. So इस तरह की प्रॉब्लम तो हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में आती ही रहती हैं जो रूटीन से रिलेटेड होती है, एंड लीडर इज एक्सपेक्टेड टू सॉल्व दोस प्रॉब्लम। तो ये तो जीशान नहीं कभी होगा कि आप कोई ऐसा सिस्टम, फुल प्रूफ सिस्टम बना दें कि कोई प्रॉब्लम आएगी नहीं आपको। Problems will come, but how will you solve it? By working with the group or by remaining aloof? That is my question.
Sir, I think it should be a blend of both. It depends on the situation you are in. You should take a stand when it's important to be strong. You should stand out, and you should be able to communicate with your workers too when it's necessary. Because if you don't resonate with their thoughts, then you will be someone standing all out alone at situations. So it depends on situations how you react.
देखिए अभी मैं उसकी बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ स्टैंडिंग आउट वाली। यहाँ तो हाउ डू वी सॉल्व प्रॉब्लम्स? बाय वर्किंग विद पीपल or by working aloof, all alone?
So
Will
yes,
you
sir,
solve
that's
problem? Hmm?
so that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to say here. It depends on situation. But if the situation demands, then you have to be a part of crowd.
Actually, for solving problems, when we work with others, like for example, if I have a students related problem, like we had this problem in our department once. There were 20 odd students whose attendance was short and it became a political issue. And how do you solve this problem? By taking unilateral decisions? The chairman could say very simply that they could not fulfill the attendance requirement, as simple as that. And actually how it was solved best was these students were called. जो जीशान भी कह रहे हैं ना कि मैसेज देना होता है कभी प्रॉब्लम को हल करने में. We said fine, we have no pressure, we have no urgency to hold the exams. And we said, do you agree that you should have been there in the class? They said yes, we should have been there. And it was a very extensive discussion with each one of them. And actually finally it was calculated that the lowest attendance was around 35% for one student. And we worked out how many classes do you need, and classes were worked out. We actually needed in all 80 classes, and then only he would have made it to scrap through all the subjects. And finally, that was set as a benchmark. He said, we are prepared to have, and in fact, 6 of us who were teaching in that semester, we said we will have 12 extra classes. You will have to attend. Only when you make up your 80% attendance. And they agreed. In the process, yes, we lost time. Other batchmates also suffered, but they also realized that this has happened because of some of their erring members. But taking a tough stand at that point of time would not have helped the matter. But my point is, we solve problems by working with others. Collaboration is a better strategy because you get alternatives. When you work with others, you get more alternatives. In fact, this suggestion of holding extra classes was given by the students only. He said it just happened, sir. ये नहीं है कि हम नहीं करना चाहते थे, लेकिन हमें इतना बड़ा punishment ना दीजिए. And they were prepared. It was suggested by them only. अच्छा, जब आप किस प्रॉब्लम के आइडेंटिफिकेशन में या जो पॉसिबल सॉल्यूशंस हैं उसमें जो इम्प्लीमेंटर्स हैं उनका स्टेक हो जाता है, द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इज स्मूथ. ये जो 80 क्लासेस हुई इसमें हमें अटेंडेंस की प्रॉब्लम नहीं हुई क्योंकि उनका कलेक्टिव डिसीजन था ये कि ठीक है, इस तरह से सर हमारा साल बच जाए तो वी आर रेडी. So when we solve problems by engaging with others, by involving them in the problem, we do a better job of leadership. That is my point. You come up with many solutions which you have not thought before. Isn't it? So we have to be part of the problem. देखिए अब दूसरी चीज आती है. Leaders are called upon to not only solve problems but also make things happen. This is more leader-like activity. कुछ नया किया जाए. A good leader is not one who just simply ensures stability of the existing system. He extends the legacy. अब वाइस चांसलर कोई आए तो हम कहें भाई ये वाइस चांसलर साहब, अभी हमने रिसेंटली वी हैव नेम्ड आवर कंप्यूटर सेंटर एज एमएन फारूकी कंप्यूटर सेंटर. Why we have named him after M.N. Farooqi? Because he was the Vice Chancellor who brought computerization to this university. And it is an acknowledgement of that fact. Is it? Likewise, we have a Vice Chancellor who gave dental college to this university. We had a Vice Chancellor who gave centers to AMU. Okay. So, a good leader is not one who simply solves problems, but he also makes things happen. He makes a difference. He does some change. अब इस काम पे गौर कीजिए कि ये काम आप बेहतर कर पाएंगे when you work with people or you work with all by yourself. How do you make things happen?
When you work with people.
लेकिन इसमें कभी कभी प्रॉब्लम आती है वंशिका. प्रॉब्लम क्या आती है? जैसे अभी हम जो लेटेस्ट एक जिस पे हमारी कम्युनिटी बहुत डिवाइड हो रही, एएमयू कम्युनिटी की मैं इसलिए मिसाल दे रहा हूँ कि यू कैन अप्रिशिएट इट बेटर. बिकॉज व्हेन द वाइस चांसलर वाज सेट आउट टू क्रिएट सेंटर्स फॉर एएमयू, किसी भी नई चीज वी आर नॉट स्टेटस, वी आर बेसिकली स्टेटस कोइस्ट. People don't like change. And likewise, when this issue of AMU centers came up, it faced stiff opposition. And AMU community was deeply divided. Not only AMU community in Aligarh, but outside also. And there were some alumni who even went to the court and they said this is diluting the AMU character. So there was opposition. How do you handle that? Do you talk them out? In the academic council, there was opposition. In the executive council, there was opposition. So whenever you try to bring change, it is very difficult to align with everyone because people have their own way of looking at things. So do you walk all alone then in that situation? Or with the core group who has agreed to be with you on this issue and ignore the opposition?
So we'll try to persuade those who are not in favor, trying to understand why they are not in favor, make them reasonable answers.
Okay. So first understand their perspective and point of view. Like for example, one of the perspective of the employee group was, especially the vocal ones, they had this nagging fear that these centers will be used for punishment postings. जो यहाँ सिस्टम में प्रॉब्लम कर रहा है या ज़्यादा वोकल है या ज़्यादा आवाज़ें उठा रहा है तो उसको सेंटर्स भेज दिया जाएगा. So when the vice chancellor came to know that this is the situation, and it's a commitment he gave in the academic council. He said no employee of the present dispensation will be sent to centers without his consent. So naturally, the fear that people had, the employees had, was taken care of. But even then, नहीं तो उनसे मना कर दो, उनसे कह दिया करो कि क्लास चलती है. Sorry for that. So one is understand their perspective. You're right. You can understand the perspective only when we communicate with them, when we work with them. अगर हम तलवारें खींच लें, इनफैक्ट इस तरह के भी हुआ है. इनफैक्ट मैं ये याद नहीं कर रहा, किसी लीडर का ही कोट है, all those who are not with us are against us. We can have this point of view also. So the point is, even for solving problems and also for making things happen, it is always advisable and advantageous to work with people, to understand their point of view, making strategic alliances with people. Because what is the job of the leader? The job of the leader is to ensure that when the bus moves, maximum people are on board. Even those who are left out, they should have this feeling. जैसे वाइस चांसलर ने उस वक्त कहा कि देखिए ऐसा अभी हो सकता है आपकी समझ में ना आ रहे हो सेंटर, एक स्टेज आएगी ये आपकी समझ में आ जाए. मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूं कि आप गलत सोच रहे हैं, लेकिन मेरे भी जहन में एएमयू की वेलफेयर है, आपके भी जहन में एएमयू की वेलफेयर है. वी जस्ट हैव अ डिफरेंट वे ऑफ लुकिंग. And finally, he was able to tone down the opposition. Isn't it? So it is not a good strategy to make things happen. जैसे कंप्यूटराइजेशन आप समझते हैं कि बहुत आसानी से हो गया होगा यूनिवर्सिटी. A university which is so attuned to doing things in a traditional way. हम हॉस्टल में रहते थे तो जब जाते थे पोस्ट ऑफिस बड़े बड़े लेजर होते थे, उस पर रिकॉर्ड रखा जाता था. And there were employees who were there doing that job for 25 years, 30 years. आप उनसे कह रहे हैं कि आप अब एक्सेल शीट पे मेंटेन करेंगे? Will it be easy? But you have to understand the perspective and bring them on board. Bring them on board. भाई हम आपकी रीट्रेनिंग करवाएंगे. No employee will lose the job because of this. और इससे फायदा क्या होगा? I mean, ultimately you have to engage, communicate. Let us come to the third activity, which is the toughest leadership activity. तो मैंने अभी तक दो की बात की, making things happen and problem solving. The third activity is really like a leaderly activity, taking a stand in crunch situation. What do we do in that situation? क्योंकि हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इस तरह की सिचुएशंस आती हैं. मैं आपसे दो इंसिडेंट शेयर करूंगा एएमयू की लाइफ से, which I have experienced it from close quarters. When this fellow Professor M.N. Farooqi came as a vice chancellor, उसके फौरन बाद there was a riot in the city, and the situation was politically very tense. और शहर में हंगामा हो चुका था, और ये वो वाला फेज था जब बाबरी मस्जिद से रिलेटेड डिमोलिशन हुआ था, और पूरे ऑलमोस्ट द एंटायर कंट्री वाज इन अ फ्लेम. और जाहिर है कि इन द कैंपस आल्सो द इमोशंस वर अराउज्ड. उस वक्त एंड द वाइस चांसलर हैड जस्ट टेकन ओवर. तो आमतौर से जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का अप्रोच होता है वो होता है कि प्रॉब्लम को किसी भी तरह सबसाइड करना. तो जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन था उसने वाइस चांसलर को, डीएम ने स्पेसिफिकली ये मशवरा दिया, एंड नेचुरली ही हैड feelers from the state government as also from the central government. It is not advisable to have so many students on the campus in such a volatile situation, and the university should be closed. Now what do you do in that situation? Vice Chancellor's point of view was that the entire country is in flames, and if these students who are in the campus, if I ask them to leave, who will ensure their safety during the passage? But there was pressure from all the three arms of the government that you have to close the university. Now, how do you take a stand in that situation? You are part of the administration. You are part of you are representative of the central government, and the government is advising you that you should do this. Can you ignore the advice? एक और मैं आपको पॉलिटिकल एरेना से मिसाल देता हूँ. You all know about Chori Chora incident in the national movement.
Yes, sir.
Sir, we do.
उसमें क्या हुआ था? गांधी जी पे प्रेशर था कि let the movement continue,
Yes,
isn't it?
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And but Gandhiji decided against it. In fact, all his companions were against his decision, including Pandit Nehru. Their logic was कि इतनी मुश्किल से ये मोमेंटम बना है और लाखों इंडियंस मारे जा रहे हैं. What is the big deal if 20 Britishers have lost their life? Isn't it? 20 odd Britishers have lost their life. Right? And as they say, everything is fair in love and war. So their logic was that let the movement continue. But Gandhiji said, and he had a very powerful logic, and he said, I am prepared to die for any cause, but I am not prepared to kill for any cause. No cause is more dear to me than a human life. I will not kill. And ultimately he withdrew. It was his own call. So what do we do in such crunch situations when we are called upon to take a stand? Can we work with people even in that situation? Or you have to be apart from the crowd?
So apart from the crowd in some cases.
Because for this act, leadership sounds like a very solitary activity. ऐसी सिचुएशन में वाइस चांसलर को सबके मशवरे मिलते हैं. एक और हामिद अंसारी साहब जो रीसेंट वाकया मैंने देखा, उसमें भी यही सिचुएशन आ गई थी. एक लड़के को पुलिस उठा के ले गई हबीब हॉल से, यूनिवर्सिटी में हंगामा हो गया और उसमें भी यही था कि यूनिवर्सिटी को बंद होना है. और एक क्रंच सिचुएशन ये आई कि ये जो हमारा गोल सर्किल है, राउंड अबाउट है रजिस्ट्रार ऑफिस के पास, वहाँ एक अच्छा खासा स्टूडेंट्स का क्राउड जमा हो गया था. दे वांटेड टू गो टू द डीएम्स रेजिडेंस टू हैंड ओवर देयर मेमोरेंडम. Heavy deployment of police था and there was a clash possible, imminent clash possible. अगर students would have moved to the DM's residence from there. और वाइस चांसलर साहब नेचुरली अपने दफ्तर में थे और सारे उनके एडवाइजर्स वहां मौजूद थे. Everybody advised against his going to the students in this surcharge state, including the proctor who was responsible for the safety. He said, "Sir, we can't take risk with your life." And your teacher, Dr. Lame, actually was a student then, and he was part of that crowd. He would share with you the inside story. The vice chancellor took a call. He said, "No, I have to talk to the students." And he went out into the crowd and he was able to avert the crisis. So sometimes it is the call of your own inner call.
Sir, I think you can take such calls when you have firm belief in your objective and in yourself.
Very true. So on that account, leadership sounds like a solitary activity, isn't it? But even in this, my point is, can you close your options of communication with others? For example, even Gandhiji had a different point of view, but he articulated his point of view to his colleagues. They might not have agreed, but they understood his point of view. When he said, "I am prepared to die, but I am not prepared to kill," his logic was very clear to us. They might not have agreed. So my point is that even in these disagreements, keeping our communication channels open with others matters. Like when Vice Chancellor Hamid Ansari went into the crowd, he told to his team, he said, fine, they are my students, but they said there are externals. You don't know whether it is your student only in the crowd. He said, fine, but majority is my student. 90% of them are my students. And will they not respect their Vice Chancellor? Will they not listen to their Vice Chancellor, who is like their guardian? And on that, Vanshika, you are very right. It is your own faith in yourself. And he went with that faith. These are my students. I am their guardian. And Dr. Lame tells me that when he went into the crowd, 90% of the crowd was against him. Like what happens, Vice Chancellor, go back, Vice Chancellor, go back. And he spoke for 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes. And this 90% was reduced to 10%. And in fact, Dr. Lame tells me that this very act that Vice Chancellor has come in the crowd has changed the situation. He's a short-heighted man. He stood on some platform and from there he spoke to the students and he spoke his heart out. He said, see, I have a pressure. I have a pressure to close this university. But I am part of your heart. I am also trying to find out what has happened. Why is true that a student was picked up. But for last 4 days, there are no classes in the university. And I will have no justification to keep the university open if there are no classes. Your agitation and classes should continue together. Then only I will have a justification for running this university. We are in it together. And the students understood. So the point that I'm trying to make is that even for taking stands, one, which stand we should take, one is which stand we should not take. For example, I cite you an example, again from Gandhiji's life. Gandhiji was dead against partition. He would often say, over my dead body. But finally he accepted it as a kind of fait accompli. He might have realized, because for every issue, he would conduct a fast unto death. When there was communal violence in the Bengal region, he went to Narkhali and he said, I'll not eat. And people understood and agreed. So somebody could argue, could say, that Gandhiji could have conducted a fast for partition of the country also. And it caused untold miseries to people from both the sides. So one could argue, but Gandhiji did not take stand in that situation. But Chori Chora incident, he took a stand. He took a stand for division of resources. Ultimately, a decision which costed him his life also. Government of India owed roughly around 500 crores to the government of Pakistan, and Gandhiji took a principled stand that they are now a sovereign nation, and if we owe them money, we should give them. The other side was thinking that there is invasion in Kashmir. The resources which we transfer now will be used against us in Kashmir, and because of that, there was a delay in the transfer of resources. But Gandhiji said, what they do with their money is their problem. And ultimately, this decision irked the hardliners so much that one of them came to his peace meetings and shot him. So sometimes we have to pay the price also for our beliefs. लेकिन देखिए, मैं आपसे ये बहुत जज्बे से ये बात कह रहा हूँ क्योंकि मैंने इस बात को एक्सपीरियंस किया है। आई मेट एन अमेरिकन प्रोफेसर, ही सेड कि मैंने उनसे उस वक्त, उस दौरान आपको याद होगा यूएस स्कूल्स में बड़ा एक प्रॉब्लम हुई थी कि कोई भी बच्चा 12, 13, 14 साल का गन लेके आता था और वो शूट कर देता था इंडिस्क्रिमिनेटली। इस तरह के बहुत से इंसिडेंट्स हुए थे यूएस एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशन। तो व्हेन आई मेट दिस प्रोफेसर, मैंने उनसे पूछा कि सर ये व्हाट इज दिस, व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इन योर कंट्री ऑन दिस अकाउंट, इज देयर नो license on gun? I mean, how can a young boy, 13, 14 years old, he can have a gun and enter into a school? तो उन्होंने एक बड़ी अजीब बात मुझसे कही कि डॉक्टर परवेज, you will not be able to appreciate this because we have got our independence through a different route than yours. We have got our freedom through gun. So gun is very sacrosanct for us. Non-violence is part of your creed. And that's part of your Indian psyche. So sometimes when people lose their life for principles, deep down those principles survive. There is a couplet कि उसके प्याले में जहर था ही नहीं, कि प्याले में जहर था ही नहीं, वरना सुकरात मर गया होता. Socrates never dies. The idea survives. Isn't it? So let me conclude the discussion. What I am trying to say is leadership and collaboration work together. For all the functions that leaders are called upon to perform, whether it is problem solving or it is making things happen or even for taking stands. लेकिन ये दोनों मॉडल्स एग्जिस्ट करते हैं. Let me again go back to the PPT which I was sharing with you, and I'll share some part of it again to you. Are you able to see?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I've already shared these three things, isn't it? And all this I've explained in this PPT. Maybe I'll share this with you. But what I'm suggesting is actually there are two approaches which I'm talking about. As per the first approach, leadership is a dominance game. But the other approach says that leader is one who searches for the common grounds. As per the first approach, the leader works with his head. Leadership is a mind game. But as per the other approach, leadership actually is winning over others' hearts. In the first approach, leader competes, but in the other approach, leader collaborates. In the hard approach, the leader is passionate to a goal which he has committed to himself. But in the other approach, not just passion, but compassion also is important. In the first approach, the focus is on getting. In the other approach, the focus is on giving. So my concluding comment on this issue would be, in fact, I got this quote from Aristotle. He said, leadership is slow boring of hard bolts. देखिए, हथौड़ा चला देना जो है लीडरशिप नहीं. A leader is one who gradually, drills slowly, consistently and then only he is able to make a hole in those hard boards. And another Chinese author in the book Tao of Leadership gives this beautiful example. Leadership as midwifery. Who is a leader? He is like a midwife, someone who assists the birth of a child. देखिए सिजेरियन बेबी जो है वो पैदा कर देना कोई बहुत बड़ा कमाल नहीं, बट हेल्पिंग मदर टू डिलीवर द चाइल्ड नेचुरली, दैट्स लीडरशिप. और उसके लिए जरूरी होता है कि मिडवाइफ जो होती है वो ये नहीं कहती है कि ये इट इज माय प्रोसेस. शी वुड कंटिन्यू टू encourage the mother. You can do it. You can do it. And when the child is born, the midwife doesn't say, it is my child. She would say, it is your child. That's leadership. And another beautiful example which I came across in another book, it was by a book by John Adair, and he has written a book, Leadership of the Prophet Muhammad. And there he makes this pertinent point that all the prophets which we have read in this world, at some stage of their life, most of them have been shepherds. And he links the idea of leadership to this act of being a shepherd. Who is a good shepherd? A good shepherd is one who keeps the flock together. And for keeping the flock together, do you walk in front? Often you walk behind. You keep into consideration even the weaker members of the flock, lest they are left out. So leadership is not leading from the front in that sense of the term. Leadership is keeping the flock together. और सब कुछ करने के बाद जो एक लास्ट पॉइंट है, not taking oneself too seriously. जिस लीडर को यह एहसास हो जाता है कि दुनिया मेरी वजह से चल रही है, वो फेल हो जाता है. और मैं नहीं होगा तो क्या होगा, दुनिया चलती रहेगी. ये एहसास कि कोई और एक हायर पावर है जो इस दुनिया को चला रही है, और मुझे उसने इस मौके में यहाँ लाके रखा है मुझसे कुछ काम लेने के लिए. That's all. Ultimately, that leadership prevails. So I will end on this quote, this couplet of Jigar Muradabadi. Says, वो अदाए दिल बरी हो कि नवाए आशिकाना, जो दिलों को फतह कर ले वही फातह है ज़माना. Either through heart-stealing manners or the voice of love, one who wins over the heart of others is the real victor indeed. That's leadership. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sir,
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
sir, I was having a question.
Yes, I think we don't have much time to entertain questions, but please pass it on to me on the WhatsApp group, and I'll definitely take them up when we meet next.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.